everybody, I'm Jeanette, a self-professed true crime nerd, and welcome to the Law and Murder Podcast, where we're going to be talking about true crime and exonerations. You ready? Let's get started. Hey friends, welcome back to a new episode. This is the week of the Cheshire Murders. My buddy Hero wanted me to do this episode, so I'm going to try and put my own spin on it. But Hero and I have had a podcast plan for the Colonial Parkway murders, so now that I put it out there, we totally have to do it. So if you don't know about these murders, then you're definitely going to learn about them today. I suggest that you watch the documentary that HBO has on the murders. It's really good, and it goes into so much more detail than I ever could because they interviewed people. They have interviews with the victim's family and with the perpetrator's family so that you kind of get a full-on picture of everything that was going on with this case. And I feel like it's really important to know what the perpetrator's family feels like because I'm pretty sure that they don't condone the actions and the behaviors of their family and loved ones, and ultimately they're victims too, and they have to deal with the backlash of being related to this person who's done some really heinous things in their life. So I thought it was really excellent. You can get it on YouTube. You don't really have to have HBO to watch it, but if you want to know more about it, I would definitely point you in that direction. I did watch this documentary a while ago, and when my buddy Hero brought it up to me, I instantly remembered exactly what this case was about. If you do like this episode and you find yourself wanting a little bit more on this type of crime, a home invasion with a murder, 22 Hours is a really great podcast. It goes over a home invasion with the whole family getting murdered and the guy going to jail. So I think they're like on episode 12 now. But if you're looking for another podcast to listen to, I would definitely take a look at that one. It's really good. So without further ado, let's get started. Cheshire is a little suburb in New Haven County, Connecticut. It's a quiet neighborhood and one where wealthy people live, which in turn means that the crime is pretty low. The Petit family lived in Cheshire, and they too thought they were safe and nothing heinous would happen in their neighborhood, nevertheless to their own family. Mr. Petit is an endocrinologist and worked at a local hospital with his wife, who was a nurse at a different hospital, but they met at the same hospital. And they had both been assigned to a child who had a kidney problem, and they started dating and got married. Together, they had 2 kids, Michaela and Haley. Haley, who was 17, was a great kid. She was involved in sports and wanted to be a doctor when she grew up. It had been a lifelong dream of hers to become a doctor, just like her dad. When she was 4, her dad had gotten her a doctor's playset, which solidified the fact that she was going to be a doctor one day. Haley was also very giving. Not too long before the terror that would strike her house, Jennifer, her mom, was diagnosed with MS. Haley knew that there was nothing that she could do to heal her mother, but she took it upon herself to start her own foundation called Haley's Hope. With her little foundation, she was able to raise $50,000 for MS and hosted an annual walk to continue to raise funds for MS and for her mother. She was a giving kid who really liked to give and take care of others, and I can totally see how being a doctor was a great fit for her. So I think I got the youngest daughter's name wrong. I think it's Michaela, and I read it like Micaela, like in Spanish. Whatever. I think it's Michaela. Anyway, her sister Michaela was 11 years old, and she was the cook of the family. Her family had really enjoyed her cooking, and she really liked doing that for her family, so much so that her parents let her cook dinner 2 times a week. I mean, not to mention that they both had really demanding jobs. Being able to enjoy their daughter's talents is a definite plus, and probably a healthier way of living altogether. She really enjoyed listening to the Beach Boys, and her relationship with her mother and sister were much like all three of them were sisters rather than mother and daughters. The two other players in this case were Josh, who was 26, and Stephen, who was 44 at the time of the murders. Josh and Stephen had met at a halfway house after they were released from prison, and together they planned to go into people's home, rob the wealthy neighbors, and take their money so that they could support their own lives. Both of them have previous convictions. Obviously, they were in the halfway house together, but Stephen had been found guilty of 16 counts of home invasion and spent a decent amount of time in jail. Joshua didn't have that long of a rap sheet. He was only 26 at the time, but he had a troubled childhood. He was adopted and had told investigators later that he was molested by the family that had adopted him. But I really couldn't find much on his background other to say that the adoption and the molestation probably resulted in him having a hard time and rebelling. On the night of July 23rd, 2007, Jennifer and Michaela were both at the grocery store buying dinner for their family. Michaela had decided that she was going to cook that night, and she made pasta with a salad that was topped with balsamic dressing. Stephen and Josh were both at the grocery store while Jennifer and Michaela were there. The guys had found their target, so they followed them home to their neighborhood in Cheshire. The guys had solidified their plans to rob the house, tie everyone up, and get out of the house to get away. So the guys, having made their plan, went back home and waited until later in the evening to go back into the house. Meanwhile, Michaela was cooking dinner and sat together with her family, not knowing that it would be their last meal. When it got late, they all went to bed, and Mr. Pettit had gone outside on the back porch and had ended up falling asleep. I guess no one in the family thought anything of it, so they didn't get him to come inside. But if this was the norm, then why would they call him back inside? I mean, I wouldn't. A little bit before Steve and Josh had planned to meet, Stephen had sent a text to Josh saying that he was chomping at the bit to get started and that he needed a margarita soon. After some time, Stephen again texted Josh and asked if they were still on, almost as if he was nervous as, that it wasn't going to happen. And Josh replied that yes, they were. And Stephen asked if they were going to get together soon, and Josh impatiently texted back and said that he was putting his kid to bed and to hold his horses. And Stephen texts back, "Dude, the horses want to get loose. Laugh out loud." Around 3 a.m, the guys go over to the Pettit home. They find a baseball bat lying on the floor in the yard. They grab it just in case anything crazy happens. When they approach the porch, they see Mr. Pettit sleeping on the porch, so they instantly find this as a liability, and they hit him several times in the head. They tied him up and took him downstairs to the basement so that he would be out of the way. They were under the impression that they had killed him, and Josh would later say that he tried to hit him hard enough to kill him. They go through the rest of the home and find Jennifer and Michaela sleeping in Jennifer's bed together. They tie them up and put pillowcases on their heads. Then they go into Haley's room and do the same to her. After they tie up the girls, they start tearing through the home and didn't really find much when it comes to money or valuables. In the home, they did find a bank book that showed that a bank account had a balance of a few $1,000s. So when they realized that there was nothing in the house of value and they saw this bank account, they decided that they were going to have to leave the house somehow and get this money because they didn't go in there to not get anything out of it. So later on in the morning, I want to say maybe between the hours of 7 and 9 o'clock, Stephen left the home and filled up a gas, one of those little red gas containers, and brought it back to the house. It's not really clear to me if they were going to set the house on fire from the get-go, All I know is that he left the house, went and got gas, and came back. After he came back from getting gas, they waited for the bank to open, and Stephen took Jennifer to the Bank of America. And here's the thing. They go to the Bank of America so that she can withdraw the money that they had found in her bank book. But Stephen lets her go into the bank by herself. So Jennifer walks into the bank, super calm, chill, serene, walks up to the teller, tells the teller that she needs to withdraw money. And while she's there, she also tells her that she's being held hostage and that there's somebody in the car taking her back home and somebody at her house with her husband and her 2 daughters. And her life and her family's life is in danger. She asks the teller to call 911. The teller gives Jennifer the money or the cashier's check that she asked for, and calmly, Jennifer walks back out of the bank into the car with Stephen, and they drive back home. The bank teller does take Jennifer seriously and does call 911 for Jennifer. And here's the tape of the 911 call.
My name is Mary Lyons. I'm the banking center manager. We have a lady who is in our bank right now who says that her husband and children are being held at their house. The people are in a car outside the bank. She is getting $15,000 to bring out to them that if the police are told, they will kill the children and the husband. Her name is Jennifer Petit, P-E-T-I-T.
Okay, she still is in the bank?
Yes, she is.
Okay, she's being held, her husband and family's being held?
Yes.
At their house?
Yes. They're tied up. She said they drove her here. I'm trying to look and see where she's gone. She went outside, but I don't... Oh, wait, I see her walking now. She is petrified.
So while they're at the bank, Josh stays back with her daughters and her husband in the basement. Josh decides to go upstairs and mess around with Michaela. He sexually assaults her and takes pictures on his phone of the terrible assault. He says that he did this to use the photos as ransom if they were to tell on him, which doesn't really make sense to me at all because he had hit Mr. Pettit with a baseball bat with the intentions to kill him. So, I mean, who knows? But he then leaves Michaela and waits for Steve to get back. And once he does, he tells Steve that he needs to do the same to Jennifer so that they can be even. So Steven does. He sexually assaults Jennifer in the living room of her house while Josh goes back downstairs to the basement to check on Mr. Pettit and finds that Mr. Pettit had escaped his bindings and had left. Josh runs back upstairs and tells Stephen that Mr. Pettit had escaped and they need to leave. Mr. Pettit was able to get out of being bound and went over to the neighbor's house for help. When his neighbors opened the door, they didn't even recognize who was at the door because of how badly he was beaten. Mr. Pettit didn't realize that while he was going to his neighbor's house, the police had already been in front of his home assessing the situation. Stephen and Josh did realize this because when they were interrogated later, Stephen had told the police that they had given Mr. Pettit several chances to save his family, and he never did because the cops were outside. Steve and Josh knew that their time was running out, so they started freaking out. They got all kinds of anxious and scared, so they thought that their best way to get out of this was to kill everybody that was left in the home and burn it down. So they go upstairs and they strangle and beat Michaela and left her for dead on the bed. She had been tied around the wrist and the ankles. They beat Haley and also left her on the bed. Jennifer, who was downstairs, was beat and strangled and died in the living room. They were still freaking out and they were panicked, and according to Joshua's confession, Stephen was the one that poured gasoline all over the house. Josh was the one that was on the lookout while Stephen was taking cans and cans of gas and pouring it all over the house. Josh says that he had poured 4 canisters of gasoline around the house because they needed to get rid of evidence and they needed to get rid of DNA. So Josh is noticing outside one of the rooms that he called the sunroom that somebody was looking at them through there, which increased the panic in him. And he kept telling Stephen that they had to leave right now. Stephen runs back upstairs. I guess he finds some matches or something, or finishes pouring out gasoline, comes back downstairs and starts lighting some matches. And Josh at this time is getting in the car to get away. And he starts the car and notices that Steve is having a really hard time lighting matches. So as he's lighting the third match, it goes off. He throws the match behind him and the kitchen just goes up in flames and the fire starts going up the stairs to where the girls are. They leave the driveway and they end up crashing into another car in the neighborhood. I think they only made it about a block. They crashed the car and the police got them. Michaela died of smoke inhalation on her bed, tied up and bound in her room. Haley got out of her restraints and started running down the stairs, but was found at the end of the stairs, and one can only assume that she died and had passed out prior to from smoke inhalation, and she also died in the fire. Mom had been strangled and passed away at the fire, and Mr. Pettit had survived his injuries. The men were arrested on July 24th, 2007, and in 2011, they went to court where a jury found them guilty on all counts. Josh maintains that Stephen was the one that had the master plan to kill them. The whole idea was to just get money, and that was it. I couldn't really find Stephen's interrogation, but either way, they're both jerk faces, and they killed people for absolutely no reason, and he probably should have left and maybe accepted the fact that he was going to get arrested before anything happened. Doubt it, though. I strongly doubt it. But that is the Cheshire Murders, kind of put into a compact, about 20-minute episode for you. And just because I had another friend that sent me something, I'm going to end this episode with a little bit of a funny. And this episode was pretty rough to listen to and to talk about, and I'm pretty sure that you guys might feel the same way, so I'm pretty sure that you'd like something a little bit funny. So, I don't know if you heard, but in Missouri, there was a man who was wanted and had a felony arrest warrant. I want to say it was for drugs, I think I remember reading. Well, the suspect was hiding from the police because, I mean, who wants to go to jail, right? Well, old dude farted a big fart, and the police were able to find out where he was hiding and caught him based off the smell. All I'm going to say is don't eat those beans, yo. They'll get you every single time. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the episode. I'm still working on the serial killer. He had a lot of victims, and I'm trying to get background stories on them so that we can illuminate the victims and who they were and try to disassociate them a little bit from the fact that they were the victims of this serial killer. So once I kind of get that nailed out, I'll put that episode out. I thank you so much for listening. I appreciate everything, and to all of you who have given me episode recommendations and news funnies to add a little funny element to the show, I really appreciate it. I appreciate you, and until next week. Hey, I really appreciate you taking the time to listen to the show, and if you love the show, please leave a review on iTunes, and it would be even better if you shared it with your friends and got the word out. Until next time, bye.